right, we will not be taking audience questions because I know the question on everyone's mind. When do we get to go to the bar and eat some food? The answer to that question is when we're done. So when we're done, we're going to get all those things taken care of.
So now we go from heroes to hacks.
That's right.
Oh, I like that.
From the sacred to the profane.
Yeah, we are the only
There's a lot of contrast between the last panel and this one.
Exactly. So with the last three standing between you and all those margaritas have been mentioned all day today. So, it is always dangerous for journalists to fall in love with a particular county on the Electoral College map. But there's a county that's on my mind I want to talk to David Axelrod about. Because in 2008, I went to Davenport, Scott County in Iowa, and I met a woman who was organizing an event for then Senator Obama. And she was explaining to me why she was there. And I said, well, talk to me a little bit about Hillary Clinton. She says, oh my God, I love Hillary Clinton. I absolutely love Hillary Clinton. Knew her resume, went through this and that, all the things that inspired her and her daughter. And I said, wait a minute, you're here for Senator Obama. She goes, yeah. I said, why? Well, because if he wins, he'll change the entire country. Scott County was carried by President Obama, 57% in 2008, 56% in 2012. Donald Trump won it the last three times. And not only that, all 10 eastern Iowa counties along the Mississippi River, which had been part of the Democratic stronghold for years in Iowa, are all now not only Trump counties, with the exception of Scott County, they are deeply Trump counties. David, what is the reason for that?
So it's really good to be with you, Major. Look.
There's a story there, though.
There is, and let me say, having been part of the 2008 campaign, that was, and Rick was part of a previous campaign that spoke to the idea of change, of fundamental change. This was a campaign about fundamental change, and I think it appealed to a lot of people who saw the need for change. And I think we've been in a series of change elections for a long period of time, which really begs the question, why? And I think it's one that still lingers. And you know, I know a lot of my friends, Democratic friends, are focused on how to stop Trump, how to change the direction of things right now. But it behooves everyone to think about why people have become so disillusioned, why there were so many people in a place like Scott County is a perfect example of that. What do they feel has gone wrong in the country? And I think there's a great deal of economic disillusionment that it drives a lot of that, and certainly in a county like that, you see that. There is a cultural estrangement between Democrats and the people who I think Democrats think they're serving. That you know, I said this to some of you here. There is a habit, as the Democratic Party has become more of an urban, college-educated party, still the party of working people, but there is this habit of approaching working people like missionaries and anthropologists and showing up and saying, we're here to help you, we know what you need, and we're here to help you become more like us. Right. And I think it's laden with a kind of unintended but felt disdain, just as long as I'm on this roll here, because it's very cathartic for me. Thank you, Rick.
You haven't gotten over the 08 campaign. You won it.
No.
I've gotten over it, and I lost it.
No. I think, look, I'll tell you what, we walked in the door in 2009 to the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, and the people who bore the brunt of it were people like those folks in Scott County.
Right.
And they saw a lot of people who they felt were responsible for it skate away while they bore the brunt of it. And I think that contributed to a series of things that have really, in some ways, radicalized people. And Donald Trump was the beneficiary of it. There's that separate issue about sort of cultural estrangement. that is real and is important. But my admonition to Democrats, even as they are expressing outrage about what's going on now, to think about how it is that people came to be so disillusioned, and how did the Party of Working People come to be seen by so many working people as the party of elites and institutions at a time that they're enraged about institutions. And further, whether you like Donald Trump or not, and I have strong feelings on this, but whether you like him or not, one thing is clear: there's going to be a big blast radius from what's going on now. And the question is, what do you build? What do you build when the smoke clears, when the next president comes? Perhaps it's a Democratic president. Are you going to simply restore what was lost, or are you going to build something new? Are you going to be a party of restoration? Because I think that's not going to be a very appealing notion to a lot of people. Or are you going to take the opportunity to build something new and be a party of renewal? And I think that's the challenge. Now, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I got a lot off my chest.
There you go. There you go. This is part therapy, part Q&A.
I know. I appreciate it. You'll probably hit me for $150 after this.
Rick, you know that this is not just a Democratic story, because Senator McCain, I was out here the last time he won a close primary.
Right.
There were populist, insurgent, harshly critical voices in this Arizona Republican Party that were anti-McCain, that were part of this same sort of either cultural, economic sense of alienation or dislocation. It's not just a Democratic Party phenomenon, it's now the reality within the Republican Party, that populist core of either culture warriors or America First populists have become ascendant. You experienced it, you have a point of view on it. Where is it heading?
You're not laughing now.
Yeah. Good thing we got the shill here just to make it look good. Something just came to me while you were asking me that question. And like, the Republican and Democratic Party have had this experience sort of in parallel. And in fact, maybe it's part of the pendulum swinging back and forth, because I think in both our parties, we've always had elements of, I would say, populism, lots of different titles you can put on it, but in the Republican Party, we've struggled with a part of our party for a long time, maybe 25% in the past, when I was running elections, who, they just had a different view of the party, right? And they were much more MAGA than they were mainstream. And so did the Democrats, right? I mean, like, how you piece together, sort of a Democratic Party that has its roots in middle America, working class, union voters, but at the same time have all these urban voters, who have literally nothing in common with them within the party. And I think what you've seen is sort of this, the final chapter of the killer bees, right? They ate both parties. So the minorities in our parties have now become the majority in the country, and they've kind of gathered together.
And the rest of us meet here.
Yeah, and the rest of us meet here. We don't put up walls, we put up mountains.
That's right, that's right.
And so when you think about that, I mean, you've had this, I think, a realignment. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to talk about it, and I like the term realignment, because those counties that were for Barack Obama twice, that then went for Donald Trump, 256 counties, not a small number, that elected Donald Trump in 2016. In order for Biden to win, he only had to win back 50 of those counties, but he still didn't put together the Obama coalition. But the warning lights were everywhere. You're losing the working class people who don't live in a suburb or a city. And so rather than recalibrate their actions, they kind of said, hey, we won, it doesn't really matter, we're going to govern. And like it or not, the governing platform didn't actually win the affection of those working class voters. It helped ostracize them. And so what you saw in 2024 was not just those Obama counties and the Biden counties coming back to Donald Trump, but he actually made inroads into suburbs and cities that had been strongholds of the Democratic Party, but he did it in a unique way. It was decidedly targeting voters who were non-college educated. So this stronghold of college-educated voters were starting to, sort of show up in urban areas. But the non-college educated voters in urban areas used to act like urban voters, not education voters. Now they started acting like education voters. So a white, young, working class voter in Appalachia who voted for Donald Trump 3 times now looks just like an urban, multicultural young male voter without a college education.
In the Bronx.
In the Bronx. And you're wondering, wow, that is a change. And to me, that was the big change in this election cycle. Identity politics is dead. That kind of religion, geographic, age, population related politics is in. It has more to do with the message than the organization of the party. And I think that it's what we're going to have to deal with in the future. And so how do political parties or candidates deal with that? I don't know. I would like to take one moment. Ms. Machado, that was the most impressive speech we've ever had this morning at the McCain Sedona Forum. And if you ever want to run for president, David and I will come out of retirement and be your consultants because you have enormous potential to change. And that's what the world needs is more change.
Here. Yeah.
David, you want to jump in?
Well, first I want to admire a professional applause line.
Like a transition?
No, we all.
I could get one for
I think
myself.
He speaks for everybody in this room.
Yeah.
Look, you know how I think political parties and people in politics should deal with this? I think they should listen to people and understand what they're saying. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is that we are a country that's based on a premise, and the premise is if you work hard, you can support your families, you can get ahead, and your kids have a chance to do better than you. All of that is in doubt now. All of that is in doubt now. And we are less sensitive to it because we live in 2 different worlds. During the pandemic, I think everybody in this room probably made a pretty good living sitting at home on their computers. And then there was a whole nother country that went out and had to actually do the work that we need to keep the country going, right? To grow things and make things and ship things and to protect us and to care for us. And we called them essential workers, and we gave them great tribute, and we banged pots and all of that. And then the pandemic ended, and they became invisible again. And we don't have a connection. And so I'm proud of I'm proud of the Affordable Care Act, and there are people here, I'm looking right at Senator Klobuchar, who were very much part of that effort. And I think it changed a lot of lives for the better. There are other things that have been done, but the essential reality hasn't changed, which is it is harder to get along today if you're a working class voter, if you're a non-college voter, even if you are a college voter, by the way, that's, and we're going to see that change as AI kind of moves up the food chain. So I think we've got to stop thinking about how to get electoral advantage out of these issues and start thinking about what structurally, what in big terms are we going to do to try and change this and recapture what we used to call the American dream that is now laughed at by a lot of Americans.
So let me get to the conundrum of what you two both described. Those in the Biden White House would say we went bigger and bolder than President Obama did in face of an economic crisis, meaning the pandemic. And they're right in dollar terms. And more things were done to direct money specifically to lower middle class and lower class Americans in terms of rent relief, college, if you had any sort of college loan, you got suspension. Things were done directly, cash infusions. All of those things were done to address exactly what you both said are the alienated parts of America. And they got the money and they got the relief, and it had no discernible
they also
political
got
balance.
They also got prices that were 20% higher.
Okay,
They
so that's it.
They
That's
have
the
a
answer.
housing crisis. Higher education is, continues to escalate. And thank you to Arizona State University for
flipping that
making
model.
Education, yes, for flipping that around, which I think is a big step toward democratizing higher education. But and this is, honestly, when the president went out, and by the way, we will get to President Trump, I hope, because I do think he has some problems here. I don't exactly, I mean, rather than solving the problems that he promised to solve for people, he is compounding them right now, and I think that is a tremendous vulnerability for him moving forward. But when President Biden went out in the fall of 2023 and went on a campaign to tout the virtues of Bidenomics, at a time when 70% of the country thought the economy was fair or poor, and many people felt they were worse off than they had been at the beginning, that was the worst marketing campaign since New Coke. Okay?
Yeah.
And so, and now, by the way, you see this president making the same mistake and telling people how good the economy is. And you look at the same polling numbers and they have the same concerns, and now they're staring down the barrel of these tariffs, and in a few weeks the impact of these tariffs with China are going to hit, and they're being told by their president, well, you get your kid fewer dolls and maybe you'll have to pay more for them. And by the way, one last point, completely separate. One of the reasons Joe Biden won in 2020, yes, the pandemic, but it was also how Trump reacted to the pandemic, and there were two things about it, just sort of chaotic response and the lack of empathy. And some of those qualities are surfacing again now. So, I would nothing I should say should give comfort. If you are a Trump supporter in this room, first of all, don't raise your hand. But secondly, don't take comfort in anything that we're saying, because I think he's got some problems, and I'm not sure that he's going to work his way out of those problems for a variety of reasons. But that should not be a reason for Democrats to sit back and wait for him to implode, because there are long-term problems that if you want to be the party of working people, you better start thinking about how you reacquaint yourself with them.
Rick, what's more important from the 2024 election? That Trump won the swing states, or that in the place where the election was not as aggressively campaigned and digested and fought over, like California, from 2020 to 2024, Kamala Harris lost versus Biden 1.9 million votes, lost 900,000 votes in New York, lost 600,000 in Illinois, lost 400,000 in New Jersey, all blue states, all with not a collapse, but a discernible loss of enthusiasm. What's more important for the Republicans and the future of the Democratic Party, the swing states or these places where the election wasn't joined and there was a discernible lack of voter support?
Yeah, David's doing a great job of picking on Democrats, so I'm going to let him continue to do that when we get to this point. So let me just actually take a moment and talk a little bit about how Trump might have won some of those, right? Because it's not Democrats screwed up and allowed him to go get votes that were historically Democratic, right? They weren't giving them to him. He had to go out and earn them. And no other Republican in my time, other than Ronald Reagan, ever had that kind of appeal, right? Where he could go into a base Democratic county and increase by 20% in some cases the number of votes he got out of there. He's not turning them into Republicans, but he's getting Democrats to go. And that includes, even in this state, pro-choice women who vote Democrat in normal off-season elections vote for Donald Trump in Arizona. That's an interesting cat. It's worth paying some attention to how that happens. And one of them, I think, has to be considered, frankly, the revolution in communication with voters. Donald Trump has changed the way people communicate to voters in a very significant fashion. I mean, David and I grew up, Charlie Black and I grew up in a world where we had pretty static communication channels, right? We knew if we needed to get to this demographic, we went on that show, we ran this kind of ad, or we did this interview. And we were having a conversation with that voter. And that voter could have been a voter we wanted to suppress, or a voter we wanted to turn out, or a voter we wanted to convince, or a voter we wanted to, get money from. But like at the end of the day, those were pretty static models, frankly, for the better part of the 20th century and most of what we've had.
Then you overlaid
21st
micro-targeting and door knocking and all that, but the digital space
all the technology
different.
was based on that model. And then what Donald Trump has plugged into, and his folks deserve some credit on this, is a way to skate around all of that and have a direct conversation with individual voters through everything from social media to podcasting to these groups, and none of it is on the payroll of the campaign. Probably the biggest asset Donald Trump had in his campaign was not part of the campaign. Now, that's the first time I've ever noticed that, right? I mean, like, we pride ourselves on collecting assets and deploying assets, that are the campaign assets. And arguably, we've taken a lot of that away from the parties, and we put it into campaign organizations like, super PACs and 501c4s and campaigns themselves. This wasn't even in that category, right? These are individual content creators who sort of buy into the idea and on their own take feed, right? So you just put out like, hey, Donald Trump's going to Madison Square Garden to see a, mixed martial art fight, right? That costs the campaign probably $25,000. From that comes a feed from the campaign of the thumping music and him coming down the ramp and people going crazy, and that gets fed out from the campaign in a tweet. Thousands of people all around the country took that tweet, carved it up 25 times, sent it out under their own. Somebody else took that, carved it up 24 more times, sent it out on their own, and tens of millions of people within 24 hours saw that. There's not a media outlet in the world that can give you that reach in one night.
Yeah.
Not even close. And they don't care if you're a Republican. They're not targeting. The Trump campaign's not saying, oh, if we could get that tweet into this household in suburban or Orange County, we're going to be able to turn that guy into a Trump voter. That's not at all what happened. What happens is it's self-selected targeting. So I'm sending this tweet to you because you're my friend and you kind of agree with me, and you're sending it to David because he's your friend. And by the way, he's pretty close to being like me, but not in every way. But he's consuming the same content. He's getting impacted. And these are not political arguments. It's as much to do about personality and what it is we like about America or dislike about America. A lot of it was negative. Not all of it was positive. And that turned out to be one of the most amazing targeting mechanisms.
Right. Yeah. And there was a lot of suspicion about Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk and that sort of mobilization.
Yeah.
That worked well enough in addition to all these other things. Is it a new model, David?
They deserve, well, what it is, when we were doing our campaigns, the first thing we did was ask, what are the cutting edge sort of insights that people in industry have so we had a guy who was half field and half data analytics in the first campaign in 2008. And we used email extensively and meetups and all the stuff that you can now see in the Museum of Natural History. But by 2012, we had 57 data analytics people. And because of the work that they did, we were advertising not so much on the news where you got people who had basically already made up their minds,
right.
But we were on 64 different cable networks because that's what our analytics told us. The profile of voters we thought we could persuade or motivate were to come out, who might not come out, were on this. So what they are on the cutting edge and they saw this, but these are tactical things and we can acknowledge those things. But there also was this larger issue, which was there was a lot of discontent out there. And they got a lot of that vote in those states where there was no campaign, sort of on the natch. And and there were groups that moved that. There were a lot of disillusionment among young people, particularly young men, which was a target of theirs. There was a lot of movement among Hispanic voters, and he won among Hispanic men. And there was reason for that. Who really didn't want to be treated as an identity group, but had the same economic concerns that that many other working class voters did. So there were larger things, and Trump was particularly well suited. I mean, I think authenticity has become so much more important. It's always been a leading indicator in presidential races, but it is more important than ever now because people's, frankly, bullshit meters are tuned up so high. And if you can't just go, Kamala Harris was very, very good off sheet music, but if you can't improvise, if you can't do the improvisational stuff, if you can't go on podcasts, if you can't spontaneously, that is how people test.
Yeah.
And whatever you think about Donald Trump, nobody ever says, gee, I wish he'd speak his mind.
Yeah, right.
That is never an issue. So, I think it's a mandatory thing. Authenticity is mandatory. But I just think there was a larger gestalt. There was a sense after this pandemic that the world was out of control, that Biden was not in command, and that was the whole essence of the Trump campaign. And so we need a strong man, and Trump is strong enough to...
I'm glad you mentioned strong because I've had several conversations with Democratic strategists in the aftermath of 2024 who simplify the election this way. Old and weak will always lose to strong and wrong. Is that an oversimplification, or is that close?
Well,
and those are Democrats using those phraseology.
Generally, I think common sense would suggest, yes, that's true, but it's more true in a time of great churning and turmoil. And I think we never really fully recovered from that pandemic. And there were a lot of, look, I could spend an hour on what happened in that campaign. But yes, I think that was part of the real question is what now? The big debate now among Democrats is how do you approach this sort of deluge? Trump is starting, lighting trees on fire every day. And the question is, where do you put your hose? And there's a difference between taking the steps you should, going to court, doing things in Congress and so on to deal with some of the things that he is doing that you view as destructive, and how you communicate and what you communicate. And the question is, in that narrow kind of chute where you can communicate a consistent message, what should it be? And I said throughout the 2024 campaign, if you're at home and you're talking across the kitchen table, more likely in this case the dining room table, about democracy, it's because you didn't have to worry about the cost of the food on your table. Mm-hmm. That is still the case. And right now, Donald Trump, rather than solving people's concerns about costs, is adding to them. And he's adding to them not just through these tariffs, but through these sort of indiscriminate cuts, many of which are hitting things that touch people's lives, whether it's how they interact with Social Security, or whether it's aid, help if you're a veteran who needs mental health care, or a whole array of things that run counter to what people's hope was, mm-hmm. which is that he would somehow make this work for them. And I think he needs to be, if I were devising, Senator Klobuchar and others, Senator Whitehouse was around here, who are message mavens and are thinking this through. But if it were to I would not repeat the mistake of the election, and I would be very focused on those quality of life issues and economic issues that touch people's lives. Everything we've talked about here, I think that the decision to destroy U.S. AID, it will live as one of the worst foreign policy decisions in the history of this country. In the history of this country. And for a whole range of reasons. And that ought to be fought out in the arenas where it could be fought. But the fact of the matter is, it's not going to win you an election. It's not going to win you an election because people are very focused close to home. They think we spend 30% of our money on foreign aid. And, if you're spending your time trying to educate them about how much we spend on foreign aid. That's a losing battle. That's not a good way to spend your time. So you want to fix, as I said, there's going to be a big blast race, and recovering any of this is going to be hard. But if you want to fix this stuff, win elections.
Yeah.
That's how you ultimately fix stuff. And so I think, anyway.
Here's what I'm going to do.
Another little thing that
I'm going to mention.
I'm so unburdened.
Yes, I'm so very glad. I'm so very glad, David.
Yes.
Can we switch seats?
Seats. I need a couch.
And trust me, nobody here wants me to start unburdening myself. So we're not switching seats. I'm going to mention a word, and I want each of you to tell me which party will be leaning into this word in the midterm elections. So if I say tariffs, I want you to tell me, Rick, who's going to be campaigning on that next fall? Democrats or Republicans?
Neither.
Okay, David?
Current course and speed, I'd say Democrats.
Okay, inflation?
Oh, Democrats.
Yeah.
Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
David?
That's interesting.
Look,
tell me why.
I think Donald Trump sees Abrego as a winning issue.
And you think Democrats still will by then?
I think Democrats will not give up the fight for his tariff policy, his deportation policy as being outside the law.
Due process.
And it's a due process argument, so you'll have Democrats talking due process, you'll have Trump talking law and order. He will not give up the fight that this guy's a MS-13 and Democrats want to harbor an MS-13.
David?
And they'll both have their lanes to work.
Well, look, I do think that he likes that fight. Right. I really do. Even though polling suggests that it's, frankly, he's won a big battle on the border. And if he just stuck with the border,
right.
I think that he would really get a lot more out of it. But he likes this fight because he knows that when he's doing that stuff, he's Pavlov and Democrats are the dogs.
Right.
Okay, right? They're going to chase this issue. And he'd rather be talking about that than the economy.
Inflation.
Right. All right, it's next fall. Who's talking about this more and more aggressively? Doge, Democrats or Republicans?
Democrats.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk with that same reason.
Elon who?
Yes.
Why do you not think Republicans will not be talking about or leaning into Doge next fall?
I think they'll talk about budget cuts. I think they'll talk about trying to reduce the deficit. I think they'll, some of these guys are going to start getting religion on being a deficit hawk again. We're going to see that already. But look, I mean, all you got to do is read a survey. Doge is not the most popular thing to come out of anybody's mouth. And I would say, too, all these things that they're going to talk about, I concur with David. I don't think some of them work very well on a polling basis, right? So if you look at how people react to this stuff, I don't think America is buying the Abrego Garcia argument that he's MS-13, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean Donald Trump isn't going to keep hammering it away, right? I mean, I think both parties they pay attention to polling and then they ignore it.
And nothing I said, by the way, should suggest that we shouldn't fight. It's outrageous to think that you can just disappear people without due process. And I'll tell you what, man, every norm you destroy is hard to reassemble. And so today it's Abreu Garcia. Tomorrow, who knows?
Right.
So that's why we have the system we have.
Okay, here's my next one. Anti-Semitism / free speech.
Republicans.
Oh, you know what? You said this is a flash thing.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, because two things about this. I'm the son of a Jewish refugee. I feel as strongly as anybody about anti-Semitism, so strongly that I resent when anti-Semitism is used as cover for a different political agenda. So fight anti-Semitism, yes. Use anti-Semitism to wage war on universities because you want to zero them out as a source of accountability. No, and I think I speak for some Jews, and there are probably some in this room. I resent it. I resent the use of anti-Semitism in that way. It's a serious issue. Treat it seriously. Don't use it as cover. What was the other one?
Free speech.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the other thing is free speech doesn't mean you're free to say what you agree with about what I'm doing. You're free to say how good I am. Free speech means you're free to speak your mind.
Doesn't mean you can be an anti-Semite.
And it doesn't mean you can shout fire in a crowded theater. It doesn't mean you can threaten someone.
Right.
That of course it has its limits.
Right.
But again, I think the notion of free speech in a kind of bizarro way has been expropriated by folks who actually don't necessarily believe in free speech and are trying to limit speech.
But I think you just hit on something I think is worth noting on all these topics that you're bringing up. Republicans have expropriated these topics, right? They've changed them, they've inverted them. But when you look at who's talking about anti-Semitism, free speech, some of the other topics you talked about, Republicans believe these are winning issues for them because they're talking to the Democratic voters that used to care about these issues when they were Democrats. And the thing that's amazing to me is kind of like what you said earlier, David, where are the Democrats choosing to fight? There aren't very many Democrats choosing to fight for Harvard, for the conduct of the universities during the spring of last year. The field is spread so wide, and this exercise is a good example of it. You probably have 25 topics that we could be talking about, and that's what I'm trying to interrupt. And so
keep going, man.
So if you're
doing good,
I know I got 1 minute.
You got 1:37 to keep for the filibuster. The filibuster.
And so you've got Donald Trump in the bully pulpit of the White House, who reads the newspaper every morning, does 3 EOs off of that before lunch.
Right.
And you've got Democrats all meeting in caucuses around Capitol Hill and around the country saying, holy smokes, how do we react to these new 3 EOs? We were just figuring out what to do with the 3 we did yesterday. And so until there's some sorting that occurs, it's going to be very hard to figure out how you use these topics as political issues.
Right.
Nevertheless, even which ones do you fight on a public policy basis?
There is a certain.
So I have one more. I'm going to get it in.
Right.
So I'm not going to say reconciliation. I'm not going to say the tax bill. I'm going to say the thing that Trump latched onto during the campaign that caught fire, which is no tax on tips. Who's going to be talking about no tax on tips in the fall of next year in the midterms?
Both parties.
Yeah, and
because it's going to be in or out. If it's not in,
look, if the tax issue, if the tax debate goes as I suspect it will, it's going to be about. Trump had an opportunity to really box Democrats in when it was suggested to him by Steve Bannon and others that he accept higher taxes on higher income people.
He did.
He wouldn't do it.
Wide open.
Could not do it for probably reasons we can all understand.
But it was wide open.
But that is,
and
now
Bannon
you have a
wasn't
situation where Republicans are going to have to try and explain to people cuts that are not always fraud and abuse, but some that really affect their lives in order to extend tax cuts for people who are doing fantastically well and don't really need them.
Right. And this is actually the big mistake, I think, is rather than talking about tax cuts, we're talking about program cuts. And program cuts are always going to benefit Democrats, and tax cuts are always going to benefit Republicans. And the fact that we're not talking about tax cuts and we're talking about Social Security, Medicaid, and USAID, and all these, I mean, like, take your pick.
Federal medical last word. Let me, because I don't know when you're going to gong us, and I want to make sure that I get this in. The issues that work are the issues that cross lines. I mean, the Democratic Party is, to its detriment, to its credit and its detriment, is a diverse party, and the detriment is if you get so consumed by identity politics, then you reduce your appeal. If you're dealing with issues that touch broadly and cross political lines and racial lines and class lines, like health, for example, and you have a party that wants to cut $40 billion from from health research to save lives of people who have cancer and other diseases. You know, there is no political division over that. That touches everyone. So it's a simple rule of thumb. really focus on, I mean, as a political matter, also as a policy matter, but focus on those issues that touch the broadest number of people, not issues that touch individual groups of voters that ultimately, at best, may seem like a diversion from the main thing.
Rick, bring us home.
Look, I think that anybody who knows what's going to happen in the midterms today is taking a real risk at looking like an idiot. And that's probably us right now.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time. Wouldn't be the first time.
We haven't talked at all about the Supreme Court and the work that's being done in the legal community to try and actually define some of the rules of the game. And you can anticipate that that's going to be one of the biggest issues that are going to be happening in the midterm elections. And so the chaos is going to continue for 4 years, in my view. This is not like a first 100 days exercise. This is a 4-year exercise. I think there's plenty in the barrel to keep, throwing things out. And it's not just domestic issues like what we've been talking about, but we've just had a day and a half on foreign policy that has a profound impact on what happens inside our country and the rest of the world. And even though you'll never hear us say foreign policy is going to dictate the outcome of a congressional election, it's certainly going to have an impact on the discussion.
Let me just say on a completely different note, this is, I don't know how many years now you've been inviting me here, and I'm so proud to come back every year as someone who actually was involved in a campaign on which John McCain was on the other side, remember?
Yeah. So far, you've been reminding me a lot of that.
Yeah. He did too, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Nonetheless,
I'd be president without you.
Nonetheless, we became friends.
Yeah.
And I never, even when we were running, I never stopped respecting him. I disagreed with him, but I had deep respect for him, and I respected him. We can all remember the town hall meeting in St. Paul, Minnesota, your home state, when a woman took a microphone and challenged Senator McCain over Senator Obama, said she didn't trust him, he's not an American, he's a Muslim.
Right.
And he grabbed the microphone and he said, no, ma'am, he's a good family man, he's a great American, he's just someone with whom I have disagreements on some issues. And I watched that from the Obama headquarters I remember on a laptop, and I thought, that's a big moment. That's a really admirable moment. And we have to get back to the point in this country where we have disagreements and don't have to impeach each other as human beings or impeach each other as Americans. I honor John McCain. I think he was a great American, and I'm proud to be here, and I hope to be invited back next year because it's a hell of a thing.
It's a hell of a thing.